As an avid podcast listener long before I even thought of being a host, I found myself always curious about what happened to the entrepreneurs and the creators whose stories I was listening to after they were interviewed. Did everything continue working the way that they had described, or had things shifted? And were those big changes or small changes? That curiosity is what has inspired this new series here on the podcast called Where Are They Now?, where I'll be re-interviewing some past guests to check in and see, of course, what it's really like to still make a living from the things we make. And today I'm reconnecting with UK-based podder Cara Leigh Ford, who was actually one of my very first podcast guests back in January of 2021. On episode 103. 4 years later, Cara's husband Tom has left his own corporate job to pursue his creative passions, making their household entirely self-employed, much like my own. And also shifting Cara's business from the secondary income source to the primary one in the process. With this huge shift, I was curious how Cara's business model had or had not changed. Because in the years since we'd last chatted, Cara has published 2 books, maintained her Patreon community, taught workshops, and continued making her own pottery. In today's chat, she shares candidly about how she's developed and managed multiple income streams and the intentional choices she's made to protect her creative joy and well-being, even when it means saying no to things that so many of us, Cara included, would like to have. But let's hear it all straight from her, right after this brief word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by The Community. With now over 100 makers from all over the world, The Community is where you can dive deeper into any topics we started talking about here on the podcast. Whether it's the debate back on episode 509 about choosing between Etsy or your own website, or trying to sort out what type of side hustle or full-time business works for your own personal life after hearing so many different stories here on the podcast. If you've been listening along and finding yourself wishing for more at the end of an episode, The Community is that more. Learn about more of the perks of membership by visiting makersplaybook.com/community. Or send me a message and I can put you in touch with one of our members to get an insider's perspective. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the show where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, seasoned entrepreneur of 14 years, Rebecca Ikes Cara. Welcome back to the podcast, Cara.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
I was looking back. I think you were the second interview I ever did.
Oh my God. And you were so good at it as well. You were pro from the bat.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
From the get-go, you made me feel very comfortable and it was just like we were chatting. So
that's good.
Well done, you.
I was so excited from the beginning because I was like, I clearly have found clay people are my people, because I was this totally random girl on the internet nobody had ever heard of. I just sent you a DM and was like, hey, do you want to talk for an hour? And you were like, yeah. I was like, oh, great, boss.
Yeah, I don't get to speak to many people in real life, so this is really nice. As I'm sure my fellow potters will understand, we don't really get to speak to real people. It's just clay and mud and that's it. So it's really nice.
Before I get ahead of myself, I'm going to have you once again introduce yourself for anybody who doesn't know who I'm actually talking to or just listening on the podcast and all that jazz.
Cool. So I'm Cara Leigh Ford from Cara Leigh Ford Ceramics. I'm based in a little tiny village called Carlingcott in Somerset in the UK. I've been a potter professionally for 10 years this year. This is my decade anniversary, which is just, I don't know where that 10 years has gone. I've been doing clay since I left university when I was 22. I just started it as a hobby. I did do art at uni, but never touched clay. I always did all the other things. that I needed to do something creative to offset the boredom of my day job. And I chose clay, and I started at my local pottery community college class, and absolutely fell in love with it. And here I am 20 years later, 10 years as a hobby, 10 years as a professional, and I'm still very much in love with it. And it's Valentine's Day today, so that's a good segue, isn't it?
Played. Well played. I love that both of us, when we booked this, we were like, oh, oops, it's Valentine's. It's fine. Both of our partners, like, nothing special is happening.
No. Tom's working, so Tom's out at a gig, and we never celebrated Valentine's anyway, because we're like, let's just be nice to each other all the time. And so we don't have to just have this one day of the year where we buy each other a present or like tell each other we love each other. Let's just do that. Do that every other day. Why not?
I told Francesco from the very beginning, I was like, don't you dare buy flowers the week of Valentine's Day. If you want to get flowers, which is always a nice surprise, especially in the barren winter, do it next week when they're all on sale because they're left over from Valentine's Day.
And you get twice as big a bundle.
Exactly. You know, I like to call myself bougie on a budget.
That's a great description of potters in generally, isn't it? Tom and I always laugh. We were kind of like, we are the bourgeoisie. We would like be like the artist's friends. So like back in the 1800s when there was like, you know, you'd have a patron, there'd be a rich patron, and we'd be like the artists like tagging on, like, please feed us, please.
You'd get invited to the dinner party because they wanted to look like they were interesting or artistic or supporting the arts.
Exactly.
But you don't have the budget of anybody else in the room.
Yeah, we're the ones which are like working out which knife and fork we've got to use.
Yes.
Yeah.
Outside in. You work from the outside in. This is event knowledge, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Tom, I think the last time we talked was 4 years ago.
Yeah, oh my gosh, wow.
Second, so that means I've had the podcast now for 4 years, which also feels bananas.
Wow. And that's before, oh no, hang on. Was that during COVID?
Well, it depends on when you think of COVID stopping. It was 2021, so it wasn't, I started getting some ideas. I started teaching photography online for potters, just on Instagram TV was a thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I did these like Tuesday tips on IGTV. All of that started in 2020. And then I think we probably recorded in 2020, but the podcast officially launched in like January of 21.
Right. Yeah.
So,
okay. So I would still count that as COVID, to be honest. Like COVID for me basically was like January 2020 to Christmas 2022. That's when it like everything started to feel pretty much back to normal again. So yeah, we chatted during COVID. Oh, yeah. What a time.
And if my memory is correct, I think Tom had just quit his job.
Yeah, he had.
I think it was like, which is part of why I was so excited to come back to this conversation again in this Where Are They Now theme, because a lot has happened.
Yeah. What a time to not have a stable income, right?
Here I am doing the exact same thing 5 years later in a equally interesting economic situation.
It's a happy story though. But I can tell you that he is thriving. He is very happy. He's the happiest I've ever seen him. He's more himself than I think he's ever been. So he made the decision to take voluntary redundancy. So his company were making redundancies. This was just before COVID. So COVID was in the news, but it was like, oh, there's this weird disease over in wherever it was.
Far away. Yeah.
Far away. And, you know, we're a little bit worried about it, but we're not that worried about it. And people were generally just kind of like, oh, well, that'll never come here. And then he made his company were like, okay, so we need to make some cuts. We're going to make voluntary redundancies. Who wants it? And Tom was like, me. And then a month later, COVID happened, like proper, like lockdown happened 8 weeks later. And yeah, he just quit his job. And we were like, holy shit, we've got to survive on our potter's income.
Yep. Yep.
But the good thing is that
you're still here.
I'm still here. He's still here. His business has just transformed from that first, scary time when the music industry. So basically, so for people that don't know, Tom, my husband, quit his job to become a musician. So he worked in corporate finance before that for 10 years and he hated it. He absolutely hated it. I mean, he loved his team. He loved the company that he worked for. It was actually, there were some good aspects, but the job itself just didn't interest him. He did music at university and he forever had the dream to go back to music and do that as a living. And he saw me kind of, carve a path for myself, a creative path and a career that I love and, being self-employed, which is like such a different world to that being comfortably employed in that corporate environment. I was kind of like proof that it can happen and it is possible. So he decided to go take this redundancy and go back to his music roots and be a musician. And he came to that where the music industry had been completely obliterated by COVID, where there was no gigs. Every pub was shut, every restaurant was shut, every opportunity to actually make any money from music was completely gone overnight. And it was a little bit of a scary time for all of us, obviously. And he basically started busking. Do you guys, is that the same word for you, busking? Yeah.
It's not, but I know it.
When you play on the streets, you put your hat in front of you.
Exactly. Maybe it is the same word. I think we just say playing on the streets. We just explain the entire thing every time.
Yeah. So he then just went and played on the streets of Bath, and that was what he did for that first 6 months. That's how we made ends meet, basically. I was so freaking proud of him, because to do that, to go out in the street when no one's asked you to be there. In fact, many people don't really want you to be there. Many of the shops don't really want you to be there because, you're making a racket. A nice racket, but some shops just don't want you there. And he did that. And it was just, it was amazing to watch him kind of grow and own that and his confidence build and, start from absolute rock bottom, literally didn't have a clue what he was doing, where he was going. And now, 4 years later, he has now got a record label behind him.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's not widely known. It isn't actually widely known.
Breaking news.
I have had permission to tell you guys, so it's cool. And it still is very early days. There's no guarantees with these things. And music, if there's any career that's more difficult to make a living from than pottery, it's music. But things are absolutely heading in the right direction and he is thriving. He's got some really good support behind him now, and he's got an amazing band that he's working with now. And it's a very exciting time. So watch this space. Do follow him. Check him out on social. So he is Tom Cornell Music on Instagram, and his band are Young Martyrs, as in Joan of Arc.
Yeah, I was going to say, as in death. As in death.
Yeah. So I don't ask me how to spell martyr because I would get it wrong, but Young Martyrs is his band. Hopefully we'll be going to some interesting places.
All right. More to come. And actually, Tom and I talked back on episode 111 about mental health and creativity and change and, some light listening.
Light casual conversation there. Yeah, I mean, his mental health has been transformed since he aligns with his outside aligns with what's on his inside. So that's just been amazing to view. So if you're kind of in that position, you're thinking about making the leap into a creative career, you're, very welcome to use us as a sample of it working to some extent. It's never a finished product, is it? It's a continual practice, and we're never going to afford a yacht, either one of us. But that's not the goal. The goal is...
I was going to say, it's not on my list of desires.
Not bothered. As long as I can just do the thing I love for a living and keep doing that and put food on the table, that's all we really want.
Maybe occasionally take a week off. Doesn't have to be anything super swanky, just occasionally.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Holidays tend to get sidelined, don't they? Ironically, when you work for yourself, you basically work 24/7, and holidays become I don't know about you, Rebecca, I find it very difficult to switch off. So even when we go abroad and we do go physically out of our respective working environments, like my studio and Tom leaves the house, it takes us like 3 days to actually come down and not be still in work mode. And even then, because we love what we do, we're still always chatting about it. And I'm talking through, stuff that's going on for me, and he does the same. It's because we find it fun and it's interesting. It's good. I like it. I don't ever get bored of, chatting through our respective work situations.
Francesco and I recently booked just like an Airbnb that was an hour away, cheap, like literally just for the sole purpose of being out of the house for a weekend, because we both work in the house, and also the house is full of its own projects. Like any room I'm sitting in, I'm constantly seeing the things I need to fix and change.
Yeah.
And so it felt very luxurious to me. It felt very like we don't really need to do, like, is this a right quote unquote way to spend money, even though we were being really strategic about it and it was a cheap place and whatever. As soon as it was within like 3 hours of being there, I was like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Like, you needed this.
There were no laptops. There were no, like, we had our phones, of course, because like, we had to get there. Well, you needed a map or music or something. But aside from that, like, we kept the phones on the countertop the whole time. There was nothing, like, no talk of work was allowed, which,
amazing.
To your point, at the beginning is kind of like, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
But it ultimately was so life-giving. And it was just 48 hours even just to get out. And I think we forget to give ourselves that time, to make that time, and then how much can come from it afterwards as well. Just
definitely.
Being rested.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you feel it more when you get back as well, don't you? You're just like, that was just what the doctor ordered. You do need to get that distance. And I think physical distance is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Especially when we love what we do. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, I think. But like, as someone who's still kind of trying to work through burnout and what I had from events and whatnot, of never taking my foot off the pedal for those 10 years as well, like, it's a sneaky thing. You think, oh, okay, I'll give myself a weekend off and that's enough. And it's like, actually, no, you haven't given yourself time off in 10 years. You think one weekend is going to be enough.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It is a slippery slope as well, actually. Burnout sneaks up on you, doesn't it? You don't see it coming. And then all of a sudden you are deep in darkest depth of burnout. And I think that's quite a danger for self-employed and creatives as well, because as soon as you've lost the joy of what you're doing, that's it. You're done. It's really important to protect yourself and give yourself that time and holiday and breaks when you need it.
Absolutely. Well, getting back to, because I know you and I can just chat for ages. So I'm going to bring us back.
Yeah.
We know this about ourselves. But getting back to like where we were at 4 years ago and Tom going full-time with music, you were kind of 5 years in to your business. So there was some traction there. I'm assuming you guys kind of knew certain things were working, but how much changed when he did? Like, did you have to look at business differently once Tom also went full-time and you were like, okay, I need to prioritize my time differently? Or like, did things change, or did you just kind of keep on keeping on the way you were before?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think they did. Psychologically for me, it felt like a lot more pressure. Like there was more riding on me and my business. Because previously when, if you've got a partner who's in full-time employment, that wage still coming in, there's kind of feels like, even though I never took that for granted or ever like assumed that Tom would be kind of, allowing me to ride on his coattails or anything like that, I definitely still paid my way and paid half the bills and things. But just psychologically, it being all of the financial focus being on my business, it did feel different. It did feel like, oh, shit.
Right. Exactly.
They really, they mattered before, but they really mattered now. It did feel like a bit more of a heavy weight. We shifted a few things around in our relationship. So Tom then took on a lot more of the household chores and duties to allow me to concentrate on business and, not be thinking about what we're having for dinner and cleaning the bathroom, as well as how many pots I had to produce that month, or, building my Patreon or writing my book.
I was going to say, or launching a book or two. Two books,
Yeah.
I think, have happened since we last.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah. 2 books in so many years. That's, crazy. But yeah, we definitely did kind of split the labor slightly differently, because when I went full time with pottery, I was in the house and I took on much more of the domestic duties, much more of that domestic role, because I was just here. And, as when I was building my business, things were, I'm not going to say they weren't busy, because they were. It was very busy. But I just found it more moments that I was able to take on that kind of workload. And then when it kind of flipped, so then I was the breadwinner, the sole breadwinner, Tom then took back a lot of that domestic labor. And that really kind of, I think we couldn't have done it any other way. I couldn't have still continued to work on a business and keep that focus, and then had to think about, paying when the council tax was due or whatever, like those types of things. There definitely needed to be some kind of offloading from me. And I think more than anything, it was like a mental offload rather than a physical, like, I'm still happy to cook the dinner. I'm still happy to do the shopping or do whatever. But I think because it was just not something that I had to think about as well, it was, it felt like I could cope with everything else that was going on, as well as a global pandemic and Brexit and Trump and, all those other things that we all had to think about at once.
Just some small things happening at the same time in the global scope.
And I'm really grateful for that. And obviously, Tom and I don't have kids, so I don't know whether, it's obviously possible because there are people out there who do it, but I can only imagine how difficult it would have been if kids were in the mix and, there was school runs and home tutoring and all of that kind of stuff that had happened as well. I'm not sure how we would have coped with that. But, we made the decision not to have children. So that was, wasn't an issue for us.
I think a lot of that stuff is, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's also been a big topic for the two of us. And so much of it gets unrecognized, right? There are people, like there's that meme that goes around all the time that's like, we all have the same 24 hours in the day that Beyonce does. And it's like, no, we don't, because Beyonce has a team of people to make sure that 3 square meals a day are prepared and that her kids are picked up from school, and that,
Definitely.
that's not the same number of hours when you offload all of that labor. And to your point, mentally, grocery shopping is exhausting. I hate it.
Yeah, totally.
So to not have to worry about that does make a massive difference.
100%. Yeah, definitely. I really kind of respect anyone who has to have caregiving responsibilities, not just with kids, but, if they've got elderly parents or, friends, neighbors, siblings who they need to take care of. That's a lot. And my hat is absolutely off to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, so there's just so much to cover. My brain's like, where do we go? So in this shift that has happened since we last talked and now, do you feel like your time or your emphasis has also kind of changed? You have a lot going on, is what I'm getting at. You have, by my count, you're making your own pots and selling them. I think you still have some stockists of yourself. So that's a little bit of wholesale, but a little bit of direct to consumer. You have a Patreon. You have since written 2 books, most recently the Kiln Guide, the Pottery Notebook that came out. You have, when we first met, we were talking about your wholesale course. I'm sure people have heard the business best practice of having multiple streams of income, but in my own experience, managing that is like, you're still one person and you're basically creating 4 different business models.
Yeah.
How did that kind of play into, the last 4 or 5 years of the two of you making this work completely on your own? And I don't know if the balance has changed at all or...
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Yeah, it's a lot to manage, but I feel like it's all levers that get pulled at different times. So when I'm writing a book, for instance, then pretty much everything else kind of, gets dialed down. Apart from my Patreon, that's the one consistent thing that I'm basically putting the same level, high level of energy into all the time. That really doesn't change. And actually, because they're kind of like my closest community, they're my closest supporters, really. If they're the ones who know everything that's going on for me, so they will understand when I have a busy period, if I'm writing a book, if I'm coming up to my final edits, if I don't produce a video every week, those guys, they get it. They understand. They're like, Cara, okay, don't worry about it. It's fine. You're cool. Which is so lovely and so wonderful to have that support. And just like, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing without my Patreon. They are literally my heroes, my angels.
I agree 100%. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm interrupting, but like, I'm assuming you feel the same way. We both started these memberships thinking we were helping people. And we do. I think we do.
Yeah.
I think we both bring a lot of valuable information to the table. But I don't know that it matches like the emotional well-being that I get from the people in the community of like, oh, this can work. Like, I know it can work. I have done it. And I still need to hear that from other people and being like, yep, you're doing great. It's okay. Don't worry. You know, like you're saying, if we're off one week, yeah, of course you are, Rebecca. You just did a 4-day show. Go back to sleep. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having like kind of colleagues or peers and friends in your corner. Yeah, that's really amazing. And obviously I do have pals within the industry, like yourself and lots of other potters who I've just got to know via the pottery community over the years. But, you know, these guys know really what is going on day to day and things that I don't share on Instagram. Like, I don't really share a lot of personal stuff on Instagram at all. It's all about the pots, really. It's quite considered and it's quite like, I don't deal with emotional stuff in the public sphere like some creators do, which is absolutely fine. If they want to do that, that's absolutely fine. But I just don't do that. I don't know whether it's British or because I'm just me. I don't do that. But my Patreon are the ones that, you know, something's happening, then they know, they know what's going on. So yeah, I'm very grateful for them. So back to like the levers being pulled at different times. So the years that I'm writing my books, everything else generally dials down. My wholesale dials down. I'm not running my wholesale course this year because I'm concentrating very much on book stuff and focusing on that, because I feel like when I do something, I want to put my 100% into that thing, behind it, and give it the best opportunity of success that I can. And I can't do that if I'm spinning too many plates. And I know where my limits are. I know when I'm doing too much and I need to rein it back. And that has come just through, you know, doing this for 10 years. I didn't really know at the beginning. That's come just through experience and trying to cope with life and stuff. And that's probably like just something that, you know, you accumulate that knowledge and that feeling for yourself over time.
Or you overextend yourself one too many times and go, right.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's definitely happened. Yeah, that's absolutely happened 100%. I feel like we might have talked about burnout on one of our previous podcasts as well, which I've experienced in spades, and it's not fun. So yeah, I try and be very mindful of where my energy is at. And at the same time, you know, I feel like lots of people look from the outside in and be like, oh my God, you know, this person's doing so much. And I'm having that same experience of looking at someone else on Instagram or, you know, via their newsletter or something and thinking, oh my God, they're doing so much. Look at how beautiful their work is. Look at how much their work is progressing. I'm so behind. You know, I still have that feeling. I'm not immune to that. I'm still feeling that. And I have to remind myself, no, it's because you're concentrating on something else at the moment, Cara. And you can't all be at the same level. You all didn't start at the same time. You're all putting different energy into different channels. And that's okay. And I feel like we all need to give ourselves a little bit of grace when it comes to that comparison of like, how is this person doing everything? It's like, well, they're not. They're not doing everything. Something is always going to give. Something's always going to have to be dialed down for a season or, you know, forever. And that's okay. That's fine. I'm all right with it.
Yep. It's all about like intentionally choosing for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think it's going back to the unseen labor of just like functioning as an adult in the world. If we're constantly trying to do all of the things in business, and look, pot calling the kettle black here, or whatever phrase, I've done this before and it doesn't work out well, where like if you're trying to do all of the things in business all the time and keep all of the levers up and all of the plates spinning, what inevitably you're still giving up something, but what it generally is
Yeah,
something in your personal life.
definitely.
Right?
Yes.
You're missing out on dinner with friends or
Yeah.
sleep or physical well-being or something else that like generally doesn't get seen online. Yeah.
Yeah. Being able to cook nutritious food for yourself and you're ending up like just surviving on coffee and coffee.
Protein bars.
Yeah, exactly.
When Francesco got over here, so many protein bars were thrown away when he opened my cupboard and was like, this isn't food.
Yeah, I mean, it was like, what is this? This is, see ya. Yeah.
He's like, it's hard. This is not like, no, this isn't food. Just, I mean, literally things just being comically wiped off the countertop into a garbage can.
Amazing. I love that.
Full cinematic moment.
Well done, Francesco. That's the way. That's the European way. This is not food. Yeah, I love that.
Well, since we were talking about, all of these levers and what you're doing, this is the common theme of my community members who are also some of your community members, because Anne is in both of our
some
groups,
crossover.
right? Which is wonderful.
Hi, y'all.
I think that's also just proof of like, everybody's kind of bringing something else to the table. Like there's also crossover between my group and Naomi's and yours. And like there are just these different things that each of us are focused on and have experience with and whatnot.
Defo.
But anywho, the theme between Anne and Rhiannon both was thinking about, all of the things that are going on. And you've talked a little bit about, adjusting those levers and expectations. So why did you choose to publish traditionally? The question that comes to my mind immediately is you already had quite an audience, a following. I imagine that also makes an impact when you're negotiating with publishers and all of that. Was there a reason that you wanted to kind of go the traditional route as opposed to just like self-publishing and having another thing you're promoting on your own website?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So with my first book, that was completely kind of one of those opportunities that come up out of the blue. I wasn't planning immediately to write a book. It was just so happened that my publisher approached me, and this was at the beginning of COVID as well. So just as COVID was kicking off and all of my shops and galleries shut down, all of my lessons came to an end. And so and then this email came into my inbox and was like, hey, Cara, have you ever considered writing a book? We've been following along with what you've been doing for a while, and we think that we could work together on something. And so I was like, well, hey, I haven't got anything else to do for the next few months, so why not write a book? So it was very much serendipitous that came along.
I feel like the publisher understood. This makes me feel like they're a very savvy publishing company to be like, hey, you're sitting at home. Now's the perfect time to write a book.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I really don't think they did know that. I didn't think they had a clue. I think it was literally coincidence, because it was almost like 1 week their email was in my inbox and the next week went into lockdown. So it was just like, it was such a coincidence that those things happened. So that was quite an organic process. And I was writing a book for a publisher and they then handled all of the printing and all of that kind of stuff. And I was very, very green to the whole process. I had no idea about publishing, no idea about how, from start to finish, the different editing stages. I hadn't got a clue. And I was like a rabbit in a headlights, and it was all quite scary and quite like, oh God, what am I doing? I don't really know what's happening. And so I was very much just being led by them. With my second book, it was slightly different because I had produced an iteration of it just for myself and my Patreon community. A few years ago, I was looking for a pottery notebook. I was like, well, I need this thing, so it must exist somewhere, and I was Googling it and looking for it in bookshops and stuff and thinking like, surely someone has written a notebook for potters. We need to write down our processes, our techniques, because we can't remember everything. You can't remember how to make 17 different pots. and what weights of clay that you're using, the type of glazes you're using, the kiln schedules, all of the
The
above.
dimensions when it's wet as opposed to when it's fired.
Exactly. All of these things we have to write down because they just don't stay. Well, for me, they don't stay in my brain. I have to write them down. And I'm very much a written person. Like I know lots of people use their phones or spreadsheets, but that's not how my brain works. I need to write stuff down. I want to see it drawn. I want to draw it by hand myself because, I've got an art degree. That's where I trained. And so I'm very much a visual hand to eye person. And I spend enough time on my phone already. I don't want to put any more stuff on my phone if I can help it. I want time away from my phone.
Yes.
So I was looking for this thing and I was kind of like, surely that must exist. Got to be somewhere. And it just didn't. There are pottery notebooks, but they tend to be just kind of like graph paper and a space where you can write a very small amount of information. And there really wasn't anything that did the thing that I wanted to do. So I decided to go, right, okay, well, I'm going to just make something then. I'm going to create something using Canva. And I worked with a pal of mine who's an amazing graphic designer. And I told her exactly what I wanted. And there was a lot of like backwards and forwarding because she's not a potter. She didn't have a clue what any of this meant, like cones, schedule, ramps. She was just like, eh? So I had to basically kind of like jot everything down and lay it out how I envisaged it. And then she put it together and made it look all pretty and nice and like, not like I'd drawn it myself.
Hierarchy, understanding information. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, right, okay, well, I've created this thing and I put it out to my Patreon pottery community. And I said, hey, I've made this thing. Do you think it might be helpful for you guys? And they were like, hell yeah. Yes, 100%. The feedback I got from that first digital iteration, I made it digital and then people could print it out at home if they wanted to, or they could use it digitally if they wanted to, but it was very much a visual kind of medium. Yeah, it went really well. And I was just like, oh, this is great. And people from my community kept asking, Cara, this would be amazing if it was actually in a book. Like if we could buy this in a book, wouldn't it be great? And I was kind of, I was like, yeah, it would be really great, to do that. I didn't know how I was going to approach it. So I initially just thought, this is too niche from my publisher. I just thought they are not going to want to publish this because this is like, the explanation that I had to give my friend who was the graphic designer about what this thing was. He was like, okay, right. Yeah. Okay.
I'm doing this because I'm your friend, not because I understand.
Yeah. I don't really know what this is, but okay, I'll make it for you. But no one's going to know what you're on about. So I just assumed that they just would think this was way too niche. And I then looked down the self-publishing route and I got some quotes and I looked at some companies and I looked at Amazon publishing as well. And I was kind of all set to go down that route, to go down self-publishing. But then I remembered a small little detail in my contract from my first book that if within 5 years I wanted to publish something else, I had to give them first refusal. So I did have to ask them if it was okay if I did this. So I emailed them and I put it together and I already had the thing that my friend had created and I had basically the bare bones of it already. And I said, look, this is something that I've been working on for a while. It's had some great feedback initially. This is what it's for. This is the person who it's for. These are the people that are going to buy it. And to my absolute shock, they didn't say, no, this is too niche. They said, this is great. Yeah, we want to publish it as well. So I was just like, oh, okay, great. Shit. Amazing. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, blimey. So I actually, so that by default ended up being published by the same people as my first book, who are Page Street Publishing. Yeah, I mean, they took a huge risk because it hasn't been done before. There isn't a thing like it.
Also, the paper quality, like the first thing I noticed when I opened it, so it's one thing for a publisher to take a risk on a niche book, but generally when they're doing that, you are not getting full color printing. Like when I flipped this open and I'm like, oh, we have, which, okay, it would still be perfectly functional if it was all black and white on the inside.
Yeah.
But we are a visual people and it's real nice.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm really, really pleased with the way it feels.
I mean, the binding,
Yeah.
the style of the binding so that it actually stays open when you're using it, the type of the paper, like I just want to touch it, as weird as that
Ah.
is to say on a recording. And I think that's one thing people don't really understand, but I know from my own design days, to get somebody to say yes to that quality is
Yeah.
not a small thing. Every little decision like that adds to the cost of producing the book.
Absolutely, and narrows their margin. Yeah. So I really pushed for it to be as high quality as I wanted. I mean, originally I had in my head that it was going to be this beautiful, like, you know, leather-esque bound hardback with like a beautiful gold like ribbon
The
that you could
ribbons,
mark
yeah.
your page on. And that was like my vision for it. But obviously that would be like £40 a book or £50 a book. And I was just
Just
like,
to produce, not to sell, just to
yeah,
print.
exactly. And I wanted this to be, a companion tool for every potter to have that in their studio. So there was some expectation that had to be reeled in from their perspective. And,
Leather and gold were outside the budget.
yeah, this isn't going to be embossed. This is going to be, but at the same time, I really pushed for it to be as high quality as it could possibly be. So the cover, even though it's a paperback, it's the highest quality of paperback. It's thick card, and the paper is really lovely, high quality paper. There's no show through. So, if you write in ink on it, it's not going to show through the other side. And Rebecca, you mentioned the special binding, which basically means it's a flat lay binding. That means that you can write with it with one hand when you're holding your mug or your cone or your whatever you're doing with your other hand. You can have it basically hands free. And that was instead of spiral bound, because I was like, I did look at spiral bindings, but generally there's a ton of plastic in them. And I just didn't feel comfortable about, millions of tons of plastic being like hanging around in the world after I'd gone. So that was the compromise, was the special flat lay. And I actually think it works really well. I'm very proud of this book. If you can't tell.
Right? Well, and that binding is actually so much more chic than spiral, which goes back to, actually, I was just thinking, like, our first conversation was very much also about branding and about like needing to create this experience and being consistent with this experience. So it all lines up. It all lines up.
Yeah. No, I absolutely, I'm very, very proud of it. And I worked very hard on it. There was the first iteration that I made previously, and I put in a lot of additional information and helpful stuff in the book as well. So it's not just like a kind of diary fill-in templates. There is like a whole section at the back which helps you understand your firings better. It gives you suggested kiln schedules. There is information about making your firings more efficient, better for the environment. There's space for you to write your glaze recipes. There's an explanation on how you work out specific gravity, on how you calculate the costings of your firings. So there is a lot of added value. It's not just a, templated diary. There's a lot of information in there that will make your pottery more successful and your firings, more consistent and happier potters, I think. So, yeah.
Love it. I love it. Well, before I get carried away on more book talk, I wanted to make sure I cover all the questions we did get from the community. And Rhiannon said that she's intrigued by how Cara has found your direction, both as an artist and a business person. And Rhiannon's curious about how you went about getting clarity on that, which feels like a loaded question. Talk about outside looking in, right? And additionally, so how you went about getting clarity and what has been the catalyst or the will in terms of, will this direction keep going? Are things going to be a lot different? I think this can both be, in my mind, retrospectively from the last time we talked to now, but also maybe where you kind of see things going in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And as artists, I feel like we're always in that perpetual, it's a journey, I think. And I don't ever feel like there's a destination. I don't feel as a creative person that I've ever like arrived and this is it and I'm never going to change and I'm never going to evolve. I feel like it's a constant evolution of what's happened before and what's going to happen in the future. I feel totally at peace with that. I know like some people really struggle about finding your style, finding your niche, finding like who you are as an artist, who you are as a business person. And they kind of, really like have an internal struggle with that. And it's like, oh, how do you find your style as an artist? I just feel like you never find your style. It's always changing every single day. The only kind of antidote to that feeling of like, who am I, is just to keep going. It's just keep working, keep exploring, keep experimenting. My work has pulled me in so many different directions over the years, but I still feel like I have a voice as an artist. I still feel like, my aesthetic comes through. I hope so. And I feel like after 10 years, I'm starting to realize that that is the case. I mean, in the early days, I felt exactly the same as everyone else. I was like, oh, I don't have my voice yet. I don't feel like I'm there yet. And I just feel like there isn't a place, it doesn't exist. You just have to keep moving forward, keep following the trail of breadcrumbs that interests you the most and leave behind the stuff that doesn't. There's things that I made 5 years ago that I just don't make anymore because they just don't interest me anymore. And there's things that I still find interesting and I still find fascinating. So for me at the moment, I'm really interested in black clay. So I just discovered this aesthetic, which I found. I spent some time on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, and I just fell in love with the landscape there. And at the same time, I was playing with this black clay, and I came across this aesthetic which really felt like it captured the landscape of the Scottish Highlands. And I'm still there in my brain. I'm still there. I'm still working on this, and I'm still coming up with new forms and new ways of glazing to really get that whatever it is that I absorbed when I was there kind of out into the clay. So that's really still interesting me right now. Next year, it might not. I might move on to something else. I might completely, disregard that and work on porcelain. I can't ever imagine that would be the case. But, who knows, right? Like, I don't know. I didn't know that Skye was going to have that dramatic impact on me before I visited. And I didn't know that this black clay was going to capture my imagination like it has. So yeah, just keep open and keep experimenting and keep following those little breadcrumb trails that the universe leads you to whatever the next thing is.
Practically speaking, how does the balance of time look between, because I know just trying to do my own educational things online, I can very quickly get scooped up into doing that all week long and realize I haven't touched clay in a week, a month, 3 months even. So I think the other thing that is maybe of interest is, like, practically speaking, what this actually looks like on a whatever regular basis, whatever that is, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, I don't know. But, we spoke to kind of those levers of, okay, when you're in book writing mode, it's just that. But then outside of that period of time, you're still balancing a making practice and an online teaching business, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And in-person teaching. I had 2 students today. You can see that pot on the wheel, one over there and one over there. I've got to take those off in a minute and put them to dry. But yeah, no, it definitely means that I am not spending as much time with clay as I would like. But I feel like that is true of most potters. I feel like because we have to be all the things, right? We have to be the accountant and the shipper and packer, and we have to be the marketeer, and we have to be, writing all of the things that we have to write, like blog posts or Instagram captions or product descriptions. I feel like that's true of most potters. They don't get enough time with the clay. I reckon I only spend about, 30% of my time actually making stuff. And the rest of the time I am either teaching other people or writing or creating content for, marketing, or taking photos of my work, or all of the other things that we have to do. So But I don't think I'm alone in that. I think that's very, very typical. I think maybe for me, it's less than other potters because I do have all the other projects on. But I feel like that's okay because the clay is it's always joyful to go back to it. I never feel like I've, overworked my body or I've got repetitive strain injury or, there's a lot of potters out there who are production potters who that's all they do. They make pots for other people and then the other people market them and they're at the wheel, 6-7 hours a day. And I just don't think that that is sustainable for me, for my body. So this way round, I kind of get to have a physical break. And also I'm very excited whenever I go back to making. So it's it works, I feel. I feel like absence makes the heart grow fonder sometimes. If I'm not able to actually make something out of clay, then I will always look forward to that time when I'm getting back in my hands in clay.
Does that then, I'm assuming that means kind of the making side of what's sustaining you and as a household is less of what's being accounted for, or like there's maybe a little bit less pressure in terms of having a shop update every so often. Like, have you been able to like free yourself, or maybe not? I don't know. This could all just be hypothetically. Sure, that'd be great, Rebecca, but in reality, no. But some of those other pressures that might have been there before in terms of like, okay, I need to have X number of stockists, or I need to have so many shop updates per year, or a lot of that stuff that puts a lot of pressure on the making.
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. I know exactly what you mean. And yeah, I feel like, if I want to call myself a potter, I have to make work and I have to sell that work. If I want the label of being a potter, then that's really what I should do. But, maybe not. Maybe there are potters who literally just teach and that's all they do. They don't sell their work, very rarely sell their own work. And that's okay too. But I feel like I have released a lot of the desire to make a certain amount of money. Saying it out loud, it's like, oh God. Yeah, I've let go of the idea of making a certain amount of money every year. Like, this is the amount of money I need to make in order to be a success. And I need to, I need my business to build every single year.
Grow.
I need more. I want more followers, more Patreon, more this, more that. I want more money, more money. Like, that is not why I'm a potter. It would be great to have a bit more money. That would be amazing. That would be so cool. But not at the expense of my soul, not at the expense of my body, not at the expense of my mental health. No, I'm not prepared to do that. Me and my husband have this conversation quite a lot. Like, he says, Kari, you don't give yourself enough credit for the amount of time that you spend working. And I'm like, but I don't feel like, compared to a lot of people who maybe like ramp it up for social media, or maybe they don't, maybe that is the amount of time that they spend working. I don't feel like I work as much as a lot of people do. My working patterns, they suit me, not the other way around. I could spend a lot more time working. I could like really ram it, really ram my days. I could spend my mornings, I could spend doing admin, and my afternoons I could spend throwing, and my evenings I could spend doing my marketing. I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy what I do. I enjoy having slow mornings. Like Tom, being a musician, he's out most evenings. So we spend our mornings together and we have a slow morning. And so, I'm not out in my studio until maybe, I don't know, 10:30 in the morning. And like a lot of people would be like, oh, that's like half the day gone. Like, I can't believe you don't start working till 10:30.
But also, the way you were describing that sounded so luxurious. And in reality, we're talking about 90 minutes later than if you were showing up to an office.
Yeah.
We're not talking like 5 hours later.
No. Yeah, exactly. And the flip side of that is that Tom works evenings. So I spend most of my early evenings out in my studio. I'm a natural night owl, so I don't like early mornings. I don't wake up at 5 a.m. with the birds treating. That's not me. That's not my natural rhythm. My natural rhythm is I get inspired in the evening, and I find that my sweet spot is between like 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. That's where I get most of my kind of hardcore work done, I feel. that just works for me. And that doesn't suit everyone else, but I'm not telling everyone else to do that. Like, you can do whatever you want to do, babes. Like, if you want to get up at 5 a.m., do your workout, chug a protein shake, have the 3 espressos and nail a shop update in 3 days, you do that. That's fine. I'm happy for you, but I don't want to live like that. And I've made the decision to be a potter because I want to exist at my own pace, and I want to have time to enjoy stuff and not feel burnt out and not feel stressed and not feel anxious. And, I am very lucky in lots of ways, but also the way I live is a very conscious decision. I've made the decision to live and to work the way I work. And I feel like I've just come into my wisdom
in this
moment. Grand old age of 41. I feel like I am able to just say, I don't want to work 9 hours a day. I don't want to work 8 hours a day. I quite enjoy working my 6 hours a day. And, I'm kind of including weekends in that because I do tend to work weekends as well because I teach on the weekend and stuff. So it's not like I don't maybe work as hard as other people, but my rhythms are different and I don't feel like I want to do it. So I'm not going to do it.
I mean, it's ironic, like the biggest perk of self-employment is to be able to make these decisions, right? Is to have the autonomy of your own schedule. And yet, so many of us, at least in the beginning, this is true for me, so I'll just speak to my experience, you have the autonomy to make those decisions, and yet, generally, we fall into like, oh, well, I need to be at the office from 9 to 5, or I need to be at my desk, or I need to be, I need to put in this many hours, or I need to take the cold plunge shower at 4:30 in the morning and then do my 20 minutes of high-intensity cardio or whatever garbage the bros are telling us. And it takes so much concerted effort, at least for me, it has, and it continues to take so much effort to unlearn that, to like deprogram myself. Because at least for me, there is a massive amount of guilt surrounding the ability to not get up at 5 a.m., to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish with ease is like, oh, wait, this isn't supposed to be easy. I should be at my computer for 12 hours grinding it out or whatever.
Yeah, that rhetoric has been hammered into us since forever. And, capitalism, well,
it's working out great. We're doing great.
Exactly. I know we all sound like kind of, lefties with our heads in the clouds and stuff. But do you know what? It just doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. We have a very small house with a very modest mortgage. We have one car and one very clapped out old camper van, which is our passion project. We love that camper van. We have a very modest way of life. We don't have expensive stuff. We don't buy a lot of stuff. I don't buy a lot of clothes. A lot of my clothes are, come from Vinted or secondhand or whatever. And I don't feel like I'm missing out because of that. I try and channel my resources into where I find the most joy. So, for instance, since my hobby, pottery, became my business, I desperately wanted to find another hobby. So I went back to horse riding, which I did when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved, and I just adore horses. They're one of my passions outside of pottery. One of the really kind of fundamental things for me is my time with Kizzy, who is my horse friend. And that is like, it's kind of it's not a non-negotiable because obviously, if push to come to shove, that would need to be,
you're going
to shove.
You're going to pause Kizzy before you're going to pause the groceries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that is where I get so much joy from just spending time with her, and it takes me away from work, and I'm out inside in the countryside, and that is something that I prioritize as part of my personal budget. I know that I need that money to spend time with Kizzy, and that's it. She's not mine, by the way. She's a friend of mine's. It's like timeshare. So I pay to have her 2 days a week, and she's mine 2 days a week. And the rest of the time, she's not mine. She's owned by her owner.
You're co-parenting a horse.
I'm co-parenting. It definitely feels we laugh because it feels like we're divorced parents that get on really well of Kizzy, and we do like a handover. Yeah, she just brings me so much joy, and I know that I need to make enough money in order to pay for my Kizzy time. And that's what really kind of like brings me joy. I know like lots of things, people prioritize different things in their life that they need that money for, whether it is shopping or whether it is eating out or whether it is, spending money on your car or whatever. And I know those things are kind of luxury. They're a luxury. I don't need Kizzy to survive, but she certainly makes my life a lot more joyful. And I feel like, prioritizing joy shouldn't be like this, like crime. We should be able to do that and to feel okay about saying like, that's important to me. And I want to make sure that I've just got enough money to do that. And that's enough for me. I don't need like lots of other accoutrements to have a happy life.
It reminds me of something a mentor friend of mine said years ago. And at the time, it didn't really click because I was so deep into the grind and the hustle of running a business that it was my life. But they were saying, decide your life first and then build your business around your life. And I think the majority of us don't do that, right? Because it's shockingly hard to dream outside of the box, right? I think that really has been like a practice skill for me to have to like work at, to think bigger, to dream more creatively in a way, to be like, wait, what can life look like? The description you're talking about, I'm sure for a lot of people is going to sound so luxurious. And in reality, you're just making incredibly intentional decisions to say, I'm okay with going without XYZ, this long list of things we're constantly advertised for, because I want these things more.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know if there's anybody, I hope there's a way for people to figure out life and then business second, but I think a lot of times you have to mess it up first. It's one of those like...
Yeah.
You're probably going to mess it up and then get better at it.
Yeah. I mean, how many of us, right, are on our kind of second career? We started out doing something completely different and realized that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then made a U-turn or a dog leg or, took a different path and have been trying to carve out something that feels much more aligned to our true selves. I know I sound like really like a woo and a bit kind of like away with the fairies with that. But actually, what else is there? You get one life, guys. One life. Unless you believe in the afterlife, which if you do, that's fine. That's great. Brilliant.
You might get multiple then.
Good for you.
You might get multiple lives. This is your third, fourth. Who knows?
Why don't you make this one just as nice? Like, just in case you just get one. Well, what's the problem in having two really nice lives, or three, or however, unlimited lives that you're going to get? Like, just make the one that you're in right now the nicest it can possibly be. Stop punishing yourself. You don't need to do these things. You don't need to have all the things that TV and celebrities and your neighbor or that person on social media insist that you have. You don't need that thing. You don't need that shit. You need your health. You need your joy. You need your creative passions. And that's all you need.
I think the biggest shift from 4 years ago to now is both of us perhaps are way more outspoken.
Yeah.
Because I think 4 years ago, we were also talking about branding, and branding is still important. We're owning businesses. Yeah. We are relying on these businesses to make the intentional choices. But at the same time, I think we were both so much in that traditional marketing brain space of like, here's all of the things that you have to do in order to quote unquote succeed. And it's like, there are things that have value, but also why? Decide why you're doing something first and then decide if this thing fits within that,
Yeah, absolutely. And, don't get me wrong. I'm still working at my business. It's not that I'm kind of letting it do what the hell it wants. I'm still thinking of new strategies to help more people, to find new people who I might feel like are on the same page as me and find my, the stuff that I produce beautiful or interesting or helpful. I'm still doing all those things. I'm still like, I'm still there. I'm still like marketing and I'm still on Instagram and I'm still doing all those kind of, things that we were talking about 4 years ago. But I think I just come to peace with where I am, and I'm not like constantly striving for bigger, better, more. I'm kind of like, I have progressed and I have evolved and I have grown over the last 10 years. And that is just proof to me that what I'm doing is actually okay. It's working. Keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to do more. You don't have to keep changing it up. But we were talking before, Rebecca, about email hosting platforms. Email marketing. Yeah, that's right. Losing the words. And I was chatting to Rebecca about what she uses and interested in Flowdesk.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. That still is interesting to me. And I'm still probably going to look into that and see if that can, match me up with the right people and be of assistance with helping my business be as effective as it can be and efficient as it can be. I think that's a word that I've come to enjoy over the last few years is efficiency. I've become much more efficient in my business and a much more efficient potter and a much more efficient marketer and a much more efficient business person. And I'm not flailing around as much as I probably was in the early days, just like, trying that, trying this, trying all the other things and flinging mud at a wall and hoping some of it sticks.
Spaghetti at the wall.
Spaghetti. Yeah. Married to an Italian.
I mean, I feel like the mud doesn't work because we all are regularly flinging mud.
Flinging mud at the wall. Yeah. I feel like I have streamlined stuff a little bit more and I know what works now. In terms of pottery and in terms of marketing and business, I'm letting go of the stuff that just doesn't really work anymore and not worrying about it.
Do you feel like being able to streamline, from my perspective, there's no shortcut to that? Like there is a period of time where you do have to fling whatever substance at a wall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But do you think, did you pay attention? Like, okay, we're going to go all in on this flinging metaphor. When you were in that stage, things are being flung all over the place.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a certain amount of like, okay, we're trying all the things, but I'm also paying attention to the feedback I'm getting, the data I'm getting, whether mathematically or whether from conversations with people and more organically, to just kind of suss out the combination of what feels good for you as a person and what you want out of life, and the combination of what gets the eyeballs to the things you're trying to do in the world as well, right? Because it kind of has to be those two things together.
Yeah. I think, I'm always trying to pay attention to what was working and what wasn't working and, changing up as soon as possible if something feels like, oh, this is not happening. This is not the right path for me. But I also feel like hindsight is such a powerful thing that when you come away from it, when you step back and you can see things from a distance, we're talking time-wise now, I feel like that is probably the most helpful data point that you can have is hindsight, and how things look from, far away is probably more helpful than looking at the nano data, like when you're right close to it. Because I just feel like, for me anyway, that perspective just feels a lot healthier and it feels more accurate as well. Because I feel like when you're doing stuff immediately and you are getting feedback like straight away, like something's like bouncing straight back at you, there's a lot of emotion attached to that. There's a lot of tension and pride as well, I think, to some extent. If you're following a creative path that actually isn't quite right for you, you kind of feel like you want to see it through because you're putting it out in the world and everyone can see what you're doing. And maybe you feel like you need to push through and do that. But then when you have that, the distance between you and it, you can then actually be more honest with yourself and be like, no, yeah, that didn't really work for me, did it? And you've kind of lost a little bit of that emotional connection to that thing. And also financial investment, if you've spent a lot of money on something and it doesn't work out, that also doesn't feel great. But when it's a little bit of a distance away, you can then kind of write that off a little bit and be like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work, but I'm still here. I'm still plugging away. So we learned something from it.
Yep, absolutely. it goes back to the irony of that I started the show to try and unravel, like, how does this work? What can we do to make it work? How can I research enough to assure that we can do this thing? When in reality, what I already knew somewhere deep down was like, you just have to keep doing it. Like, you just have to keep showing up, and you have to keep doing it. And you will learn things as you go, and you will change as you go. And as much as I want to be on here giving people like helpful suggestions or stories to pivot and avoid the potholes, you're not going to avoid every single one.
No.
Hopefully you won't hit the biggest ones, but you might hit a little one.
And some of those potholes are completely out of our control, right? Brexit, for instance, like we've had something over here, which I don't know whether you guys have even heard of, but it's called GPSR, which is General Product Safety Regulation. And since the UK left the EU, makers have been held up against these safety regulations, which means that a lot of us had to stop selling to the EU. And that includes Northern Ireland, which, as a maker is potentially a big chunk of your revenue comes from selling to, across the channel and across the Irish Sea. So that was completely unavoidable. No one saw that coming. That hit us in peak busy time in December when no one knew what the hell GPSR meant. And we just all had to kind of like figure it out and decide what we were going to do, whether we were going to still continue to sell or not, and, disappoint some of our customers and work out practically what it actually meant for our business and all of those kind of stuff. And that's not something that you can ever predict. And, we can't predict things like that happening. We can't predict the war in Ukraine. You can't predict energy prices spiking. You can't predict tariffs. You can't predict any of that stuff. And so you can just kind of deal with it as it comes along and deal with it the best you can and know that everyone is in the same situation and you're not alone. And I feel like as a community, Potters are just the nicest, kindest, most generous people I've ever met in my entire life. And just kind of like reaching out to someone via DM or email or Patreon or wherever you kind of like, hang out and just say, hey, this is all a bit pants, isn't it? And just having a little vent can actually make the world a difference and make you feel much less alone, much less like you're going to lose your marbles at any particular moment.
Yes, absolutely. It's like realizing even people who aren't trying to do what you're doing, but who still see it and still are like, you're doing okay. I cannot tell you the deep, abiding level of gratitude for when somebody writes a message to us in whatever medium, when something has happened that we weren't anticipating, that's out of your control, and you're trying to do everything so perfectly. You've set this due date or you have this thing. And then when you have to write that message to say, hey, for example, like this last holiday season, right? The most important time for so many of us that sell the things we make. We both got so sick. We had a 4-day show, which did not go that great.
I remember you saying.
It didn't go bad per se, but it didn't go nearly as great as we thought it was going to. And I promptly got incredibly ill the night as we were loading up, as we were leaving.
Oh my God.
And that's the first week of December. So the plan was like to take any pots we still had, photograph them when we got home, and do a nice big online shop update.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was on the couch for 3 days.
Oh, man.
And then as soon as I was off the couch, Francesca was on the couch 1 week after the other. And at that point, we're in mid-December.
Yeah.
You've lost the window of Christmas shopping.
Yeah.
So to be able to have people be like, hey, I still want to order this thing. I know it's not going to come in time. That's fine. And I did like a PDF with a picture of it and said like the elves were sick and that the person gifting them had planned ahead, blah, blah, blah. And they totally were like, that's amazing. I didn't even expect that. That's enough.
Oh, that's so nice.
It's just, oh man, like what a relief. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes people are cranky, but
yes,
on the whole.
Yeah, and I feel like it's okay to get upset about when stuff like that happens. It's okay to feel bummed out when, you look forward to something, you planned and you've done everything you possibly can. And then at the 12th hour, the world comes in and goes, no, and smacks it out of your hand. And you're just like, okay. It's okay to feel bummed out about that. And it's lovely when our customers and our followers or community members just go, it's okay. Don't worry. we're here. We're still here. We still want your stuff.
You can get a new scoop of ice cream to put on the cone that just fell off and flopped onto the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. It does feel a lot now, this many years later, it feels, or at least I'm trying to convince myself that it feels a lot less, what's the word I'm looking for? Not an ultimate, like deterministic, or like it feels like maybe before it felt like we always had to do all of the things in order for everything to be okay. And now it's like, we're just going to keep showing up. We're just going to keep going. And because we keep going, it will all be okay.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I feel like as long as you're still enjoying it, as long as you still wake up and are excited about your day and, like you're excited about seeing the next thing that comes out of the kiln and you're excited about, a new book or a new course or whatever, I feel like that means that you're doing it all right. And it's as long as that's still happening, then you're going in the right direction.
I like that. Well, is there anything else that there's so many things over the course of these last few years, but is there something that we completely missed or something that in this period of time from then till now that you want people to know about?
That's a really good question. Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't think so. I feel like everything that I have, I put out there. So my new book, the Essential Pottery Notebook, I feel like that is the thing that's taking up the most of my brain space right now. And the thing that I'm really excited about sharing with everyone, really excited about getting feedback from everyone as well. I feel like if you find that helpful, then my Patreon is kind of like a natural thing for people to look up. My YouTube is kind of like silently just hanging in the background there. And I'm constantly putting, when I have time, putting new content on there to be helpful for people. And yeah, those are the things that I'm kind of working on right now. And my sky pots as well. I feel like those are the things that I want people to see and to experience and to let me know if they love. That's basically it.
I was like, yeah, that's a long list already there, girlfriend. I love it. Well, we'll link to the site and all of the things in the show notes, which now 4 years later we have and we know what to do with. So
shout out.
So much progress. So much progress. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, very quickly, just audibly speaking, where on the internet do you want to send people?
So I hang out mostly on my Patreon, which you can join free. And there's a 7-day free trial that you can come and have a little nose around and see if it's right for you. I'm also, of course, on Instagram. I'm still very much on there, even though sometimes it feels like a bit of a difficult place to be. I'm still showing up for my followers because they're the people that, matter. And I still love the connections that I have on there. So connecting to my fellow potters and my followers is still very important to me. And YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube. So my Instagram is Cara Leigh Ceramics. So KaraLeigh. My YouTube is also the same. So Cara Leigh Ceramics. Patreon is also the same. It's all the same. I tried to keep brand consistency wherever I am. And that's where you can find me. That's where I hang out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. I'm acutely aware of how much later it is for you than for me.
It's dinner time, and I have shepherd's pie. Woo woo.
Nice. What a solid winter meal. Okay, I'm getting hungry. It's time for me to go eat lunch. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much.
It was so nice talking to you, Rebecca. It's always a joy and a pleasure. And yeah, I'm sure our paths will cross very soon.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Cheers. I don't know about you, but I am sure relieved to hear that even for the people we see online seemingly doing all the things, in reality, they are doing specific things at specific times and letting the other stuff pass by. It's not realistic to think as only one person you can write a book and keep your previous shop update production schedule the same. And yes, I am saying that out loud for myself. even if the internet makes it feel like that's what everyone else is doing. As Cara has reminded us, and especially me, the path to sustainable creative work is not necessarily about grinding harder, optimizing your productivity, or expanding relentlessly. It might actually be about carefully choosing what matters most and letting go of the rest. And most of all, doing so is not a failure. It's intentional resource allocation that protects both creative joy and physical well-being. And what that looks like is going to be different for every single one of us. Maybe it's slow mornings and late nights, like Cara. Or maybe it's 5 a.m. marathon throwing sessions, like Isaac Shue discussed back on episode 608. But don't forget, Isaac also mentioned just how early he's in bed. Don't be like me and think it's both the 5 a.m. mornings and the late nights. That, my friends, is a recipe for burnout. And I want us all pursuing this creative life of our dreams for the long run. Because if there's one thing I've learned from the last 4 years of conversations, it's that there isn't really a shortcut to however you define success in leading a creative life. Instead, we each need to figure out our own ways to be able to simply keep showing up. Of course, if that feels overwhelming right now, and you're trying to even think of what options might be for you, I'd love for you to consider brainstorming with your fellow makers inside of the community. At least for my own brain, it can be awfully hard to think outside of the box if I'm stuck by myself inside of my own head. But as soon as I'm in conversation with someone else who's also trying to pursue a creative life, whether writing back and forth in the comments of a post or chatting virtually during a live hangout, the ideas start flowing. And best of all, this dream of making a living from the things we make doesn't feel nearly as crazy as it can sometimes feel when we're surrounded by a world of, let's call them, more popular career paths. However you choose to do life, whether it's taking the leap of being a full-time maker or intentionally creating what you love on the nights and weekends, inside of the community, there are fellow makers also doing it. From full-time makers like Amy Brummond of Pines and Pottery on last week's episode, to intentional side hustlers who want to take their pottery passion more seriously. Together, we're all chatting about what it's really like to make a living from the things we make. If you want to learn more about the perks of the community membership and support the creation of this very podcast in the process, visit makersplaybook.com/community to learn more. Until next time, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Because together, we've got this. Audio post-production of this podcast is made possible by help from Christy Kotzfun, with promotional material assistance from Queenie Maliki. The Maker's Playbook podcast is recorded on the original homelands of the Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee people, where the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present.
This podcast is a production of the Brickyard Network, an extension of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts. To find out more about our lineup of ceramic podcasts, visit brickyardnetwork.org.